Hello everyone. My name is Sky Pemberton, and I am 24 years old. In my life, I have been blessed with opportunities many people can only dream of, but I've also learned that a seven-figure trust fund is more like a wall than a window. It isolates you. It makes you wonder if anyone sees you, the actual person, or if they only see a walking, talking bank account. I got so tired of that question that I decided to do something drastic, something that would lead me to stand on a stage in a $1,000 dress I didn't pay for, in front of hundreds of people, and pay for the single most humiliating night of my supposed friends' lives. And the most deliciously ironic part? They thanked me for it. The breaking point wasn't one big, dramatic betrayal, not at first. It was 1,000 tiny cuts. It was the friend in high school who borrowed my great-grandmother's diamond earrings for a party and lost one. When I was heartbroken, she just shrugged and said, "You can just buy new ones." It was the boy I dated who, after 2 months, presented me with a detailed business plan for a startup he expected my father to fund. The core injustice that truly set me on this path, though, was with a girl named Amelia, who I had considered my best friend for 3 years. I found out she'd been systematically selling my designer clothes on a high-end consignment app. When I confronted her, tears in my eyes, her only defense was, "Sky, be real. You don't even wear half this stuff. It's not like you can't afford to replace it." Her words didn't just hurt me, they erased me. I wasn't a friend who had been betrayed. I was a renewable resource that had been depleted. That was the day I decided I was done being a resource. I wanted to be a person. So, that's my story. It's about wealth, lies, and the moment a group of privileged bullies tried to make a poor scholarship girl their punching bag without realizing she was the one secretly funding their entire glamorous lives. If you've ever felt underestimated or judged for things you can't control, hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I have a feeling this story might resonate with a few of you. Don't forget to subscribe, because you won't want to miss how this ends. My childhood was a gilded cage, beautiful from the outside but a cage nonetheless. The Pemberton name was practically synonymous with telecommunications in the Western Hemisphere. My father, a genius of innovation, and a man whose love was often expressed through acquisitions and stock options, had built an empire. My mother, a woman of impeccable taste and social grace, managed the family's philanthropic endeavors and public image. They loved me, I never doubted that. But their love was filtered through the lens of their world, a world of board meetings, charity galas, and legacy. My older sister, Aubrey, was the golden child in our family, though not in a malicious way. She was simply perfect for the role she was born into. She was graceful, socially adept, and had a mind for business that mirrored our father's. She thrived in the spotlight. Family dinners were often filled with praise for Aubrey's latest internship at a prestigious investment bank or her successful chairing of a junior league fundraiser. She was the heir apparent, the daughter who made sense. I was different. I was the quiet one, the bookworm who preferred the library to the ballroom. My passion wasn't finance, it was astrophysics. I wanted to understand the universe, the great, silent, honest expanse of stars and galaxies that didn't care about the Pemberton name. My parents supported my interests in the way one supports a quaint hobby. "That's nice, dear," my father would say, before turning back to a conversation with Aubrey about market projections. They saw my passion as a phase, a gentle eccentricity that I would eventually outgrow before settling into a more suitable life path, likely involving a seat on the board of one of our family's charitable foundations. This dynamic, this gentle but persistent overlooking of my essence, fostered a deep-seated need for external validation that I couldn't find at home. If my own family couldn't see me for who I was, how could anyone else? The neglect wasn't cruel, it was casual. At my high school science fair, I presented a project on stellar parallax that won first place. My parents were in Geneva for a tech conference. They sent a massive bouquet of flowers to the school, a grand gesture that felt emptier than the auditorium after everyone had gone home. Aubrey, to her credit, had called me, genuinely thrilled for me, but she was already swept up in her own world at Wharton. The constant awareness of being the other child, the artistic one, the dreamer, forced me to develop a fierce independence. Since my interests weren't seen as serious, I learned to pursue them seriously on my own. I taught myself coding to run complex simulations for my astronomy projects. I became meticulous with the generous allowance I was given, saving it not for designer bags but for rare textbooks and a high-powered telescope that I kept on the veranda. My portal to a world where I felt seen and significant, this quiet diligence became my armor. The less they paid attention to my path, the more determined I became to carve it myself. There was one person who saw me, truly saw me, from the very beginning. My grandmother, my father's mother, Evelyn Pemberton. She was the matriarch of the family, but she wore her status with an easy, unpretentious charm. While the rest of the family discussed stock portfolios, she would pull me aside and ask about pulsars and nebulae. She had a mind as sharp as crystal and a spirit that valued substance over style. Evelyn's home was my sanctuary. It was a sprawling but cozy estate in the countryside, filled with books and art and the smell of old paper and fresh-baked bread. She was the one who gifted me my first star chart when I was 8 years old. "Never let anyone tell you that looking up is a waste of time, Sky," she had told me, her hand warm on my shoulder. "It's the people who never look up that are truly lost." When I graduated high school, the family assumption was that I would attend an Ivy League school, major in art history or something equally respectable and benign, and continue being the other Pemberton daughter. But the experience with Amelia, my backstabbing ex-friend, had planted a seed of rebellion in me. I was suffocating. I didn't want to go to another school where my last name would walk into the room before I did. I went to my grandmother, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. We sat in her sun-drenched library, dust motes dancing in the light. I laid out my insane plan. I wanted to attend West Haven University, a top-tier but not ostentatiously elite school on the West Coast, known for its strong physics program. More than that, I wanted to go incognito. I wanted to use my mother's maiden name, Collins. I wanted to live in a standard dorm, not a luxury apartment. I wanted to exist on a budget, to be known as Sky Collins, a scholarship student who got in on her own merit, not Sky Pemberton, the heiress who could buy the whole campus. I expected her to be shocked, to try and talk me out of it. Instead, she just watched me, her gaze thoughtful. After a long silence, she smiled, a slow, conspiratorial smile that made my heart soar. "The world is full of people who will judge a book by its cover, my dear," she said, her voice soft but firm. "And a very expensive gilded cover can be the most blinding of all. I think it's a brilliant idea." She became my co-conspirator. She helped me convince my parents, framing it as a character-building exercise and a way for me to gain some independence before inevitably returning to the fold. My father was skeptical, my mother worried, but Evelyn's endorsement carried immense weight. They relented under the condition that I maintain a constant secret line of communication with our head of security and that I had access to emergency funds, just in case. I agreed, though I privately vowed never to use them. My grandmother helped me build my new identity. We fabricated a backstory for Sky Collins, daughter of 2 hardworking high school teachers from a small town in Oregon, a girl who dreamed of the stars and earned a full-ride academic scholarship to make that dream a reality. It was a simple, believable story, a story about a girl who had earned her place. A story I desperately wanted to be my own. As I packed my bags, leaving behind a closet full of designer clothes for a suitcase of carefully selected items from Target and secondhand stores, my grandmother gave me a final piece of advice. "Remember, Sky, value is not determined by what you have but by who you are. Go find the people who are wise enough to see the difference." Her words became my mantra, the compass for the new uncertain world I was about to enter. I was terrified, but for the first time in my life, I felt truly exhilaratingly free. The cage door was open and I was flying out. The first few weeks at West Haven were a shock to my system. The anonymity I craved was both liberating and jarring. For the first time, no one held a door open for me because they recognized my last name. No one's eyes flickered with recognition or calculation when I introduced myself. I was just Sky Collins, one of thousands of new faces in a sea of hopeful freshmen and jaded upperclassmen. The dorm room was a tiny, cinder-block box, a stark contrast to my sprawling bedroom suite back home. My roommate, a perpetually stressed pre-med student named Jenna, was nice enough but buried in her own anxieties. The reality of a budget hit me hard. I learned the art of instant noodles, the strategic timing of visiting the dining hall to maximize leftover availability, and the specific agony of realizing you couldn't afford to join a group of classmates for a spontaneous pizza night. It was in this state of managed poverty that I first met Tiffany Vance. She was the undisputed queen of our dormitory floor and by extension, a prominent figure in the freshman social scene. Tiffany was everything I was pretending not to be: wealthy, polished, and effortlessly confident. Her family wasn't Pemberton-level rich, but they were firmly in the 1%, with a lineage of West Haven alumni that gave her an inherited status on campus. She had a magnetic personality that drew people in, and she had already cultivated a clique of acolytes who orbited her like moons. They called themselves the A-list, a name they adopted with a self-aware smirk that didn't quite mask their sincerity. The group consisted of Madison, Tiffany's sharp-tongued and fiercely loyal second-in-command, Carter, a handsome legacy student whose family owned a string of luxury hotels, and a few other girls, Lauren and Becca, who seemed to mirror Tiffany's opinions and fashion choices with flawless precision. They noticed me in the way a collector notices a peculiar beetle. I was the scholarship girl on their hall, a curiosity. One afternoon, as I was heading to my work-study job at the campus library, Tiffany cornered me in the hallway. "Sky, right?" she asked, her smile bright and perfectly calibrated. She was flanked by Madison and Lauren. "Yeah, that's me," I said, clutching my worn canvas tote bag. "We were just talking and we think it's so admirable that you're here on a scholarship," Tiffany said, her tone dripping with a condescension she probably mistook for kindness. "It must be so much work. We're going out for sushi tonight. You should totally come, our treat, of course." It was a test. A subtle assertion of their power and my perceived lack. A small part of me, the old Sky who craved acceptance, was tempted. But the new Sky, the one who was here for something real, felt a prickle of indignation. Still, I knew that outright refusing would paint me as ungrateful or antisocial. I needed to blend in. "That's so nice of you," I said, forcing a grateful smile. "I'd love to, but I have to work. The library job, you know. Gotta earn my keep." I added a little self-deprecating shrug for effect. Madison smirked. "Right, the library. How studious." This became the pattern of our interactions. They would extend these patronizing invitations, and I would politely decline, citing my job or my studies. They saw me as a project, their token poor friend. They would offer me hand-me-down clothes that were still more expensive than anything I owned, always with a comment like, "This color just didn't work for me, but it would be perfect for you." They treated me with the kind of performative charity reserved for stray animals. The conversation that solidified my place in their narrative, the moment that became the final, damning straw, happened about a month into the semester. I was in my room, trying to make sense of a particularly dense chapter on quantum mechanics, when Tiffany and Madison knocked and entered without waiting for an answer. "Hey, Sky," Tiffany chirped, flopping onto Jenna's perfectly made bed. "We're planning our trip for fall break. We're thinking Cabo. Carter's dad is letting us use their villa. You should come." I knew what was coming. The price of a plane ticket to Cabo, even booked in advance, was more than my entire budget for the semester. "Wow, that sounds amazing," I said, keeping my voice light. "I don't think I can though. I was planning on picking up extra shifts at the library to save up for next semester's books." Madison leaned against the doorframe, examining her perfectly manicured nails. "Oh, right, books. I just put them on my dad's account, it's easier." "My dad's account is a little different," I replied with a tight smile. Tiffany sat up, her expression turning serious, as if she were about to impart some great wisdom. "You know, Sky," she began, her voice soft and conspiratorial. "You're really smart, and you work hard. It's not fair that you have to struggle like this while people like us, have it so easy. It's a systemic issue, really. The inequity is just staggering." She said it with such earnestness, as if she had just discovered the concept of economic disparity. She was performing empathy, using my fabricated life as a prop for her own moral development. In that moment, the hurt I felt was so profound, so crushing, it was almost physical. It was the same erasure I'd felt with Amelia, but somehow worse. Amelia had seen me as a resource. Tiffany saw me as a concept, a symbol of injustice that made her feel more enlightened. She wasn't my friend, she was a tourist in my struggle, and my struggle wasn't even real. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that my father could buy her father's company as a stocking stuffer. I wanted to tell her that the inequity she found so staggering was the very thing I was trying to escape. I wanted to show her the photo on my phone of me and my grandmother on our family's private jet, the one I had looked at just last night, feeling a pang of homesickness. But I couldn't. I was trapped in the role I had created for myself, so I just nodded, my throat tight. "Yeah," I managed to say. "It's tough." After they left, leaving the scent of expensive perfume and casual privilege lingering in my tiny room, I sank onto my bed. The emotional weight of my deception, of their condescension, pressed down on me. I felt a wave of intense emotional pain, a loneliness so sharp it stole my breath. I had come here to escape the hollowness of my old life, only to find myself in a new, more insidious kind of prison. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew would understand. "Grandma?" I whispered, my voice breaking on the single word. "Sky, what's wrong, my dear?" Her voice was an anchor in my swirling sea of confusion and hurt. I told her everything. About Tiffany and Madison, about the admirable scholarship, the hand-me-downs, the conversation about Cabo and systemic inequity. I cried, silent tears of frustration streaming down my face. I confessed that I felt like a fraud, that the entire experiment was a failure, that maybe I was destined to be alone, surrounded by walls, whether they were made of money or of lies. She listened patiently, not interrupting once. When I was finished, there was a long pause. "So," she finally said, her voice surprisingly steely. "They think you are weak because you are poor. They believe their value comes from their family's bank account, and yours is diminished by a lack of one." "Yes," I choked out. "Then you must prove them wrong," she said, her tone absolute. "This is not a failure, Sky. This is the test. You went there to find people of substance. You have found the opposite. This is invaluable data. Do not let their shallow judgment define your experience. You are a Pemberton, not because of the money, but because of the strength that runs in your veins. The same strength that built an empire from nothing. You have that same grit. Now, you must decide how you are going to use it. Are you going to run home, or are you going to finish what you started and prove to yourself, and to them, what real value looks like?" Her words were like a splash of ice water. The hurt began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She was right. I wasn't Sky Collins, the charity case. I was Sky Pemberton, and I was done feeling small. I had let their narrative control me, let their condescension make me feel like a victim. No more. That night marked a definitive shift. The decision was made. I would not just survive at West Haven, I would excel. I would succeed on my own terms, using the very skills they overlooked. I would get the highest grades in my program. I would build a life here, a real one, separate from them, and when the time was right, I would show them just how wrong they were. The game had changed. It was no longer about finding friends, it was about defining myself. The point of no return had been crossed, and I felt a strange, thrilling sense of power in that realization. My hardened resolve was my new shield, and I was ready for battle. The weeks following my phone call with my grandmother were a study in disciplined loneliness. I erected emotional walls around myself, polite but impenetrable. I still interacted with Tiffany and her clique in the dorm, but I was an observer now, not a participant. Their casual slights and patronizing comments no longer stung, they were merely data points for my experiment. I cataloged every instance of their snobbery, every tone-deaf comment about my difficult life. It fueled me. My life became a strict, methodical routine. Wake up at 5 a.m., study, go to class, work my 4-hour shift at the Sterling Memorial Library, study more, sleep. It was an arduous path, deliberately chosen. I lived on black coffee and the grim satisfaction of academic progress. The library became my haven. The scent of old books was a balm to my frayed nerves, the silence a welcome respite from the shallow chatter of the A-list. My work-study job involved reshelving books and managing the circulation desk. It was tedious, humbling work, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It grounded me in a reality I had never known. I saw the real scholarship students, the ones juggling 2 jobs and a full course load, their faces etched with exhaustion, but also with a fierce determination that I recognized and admired. I was a tourist in their world, but I was learning their language. The contrast between my Spartan existence and the carefree privilege of Tiffany's group was a constant, glaring reality. I'd be eating a squashed peanut butter sandwich in the library break room, scrolling through my phone and see their Instagram stories. One weekend, it was a spontaneous shopping trip to San Francisco, private jets and shopping bags from boutiques I knew my mother frequented. The next, it was front row seats at a concert captioned "OMG Best Night Ever" with a string of champagne bottle emojis. Tiffany would sometimes send me a picture from one of these excursions with a text like, "Thinking of you, wish you could be here." The faux sympathy was so transparent it was almost comical. I would reply with a simple, "Looks fun. I'm just finishing up a monster paper on binary star systems. Have fun for me." My academic life became my shield and my sword. They saw it as my prison, I was honing it into a weapon. It was in the quiet stacks of the library, between astrophysics and medieval history, that I began to forge my new support system, my chosen family. The first was Liam. He had a work-study job alongside me, a junior majoring in journalism. He had a quick wit, a kind smile, and a refreshingly cynical view of the campus social hierarchy. He was the real deal, smart, funny, and working his way through college without a safety net. He noticed me because I was always there, head buried in a textbook. "Collins, right?" he asked one afternoon, leaning against a bookshelf I was organizing. "Do you ever leave this place? I'm starting to think you're a literary ghost." I laughed, a real, genuine laugh that felt foreign in my own throat. "Something like that," I said. "It's quiet here." "Tell me about it," he said. "It's the only place on campus you can't hear the sound of trust funds maturing." That was the beginning. We started taking our breaks together, sharing stories over stale coffee and vending machine snacks. I told him the carefully constructed tale of Sky Collins, and he never questioned it. He talked about his dream of becoming an investigative reporter, of holding power accountable. He respected my dedication to my studies. He didn't pity it. My other ally I found in the intellectual trenches of advanced astrophysics, a class so difficult that it fostered a unique brand of camaraderie among its students. Her name was Chloe, a brilliant, unassuming girl with a passion for theoretical physics that matched my own. We bonded over a particularly brutal problem set, working late into the night in a deserted classroom, scrawling equations on a whiteboard until our hands were stained with marker ink. Chloe didn't care about clothes or parties, she cared about ideas. She was fascinated by my theories on dark matter, and I was in awe of her mathematical prowess. We, along with a couple of other serious students from the class, formed a study group. We were a motley crew of nerds, united by a shared intellectual curiosity. With Liam and my study group, I was no longer just an actress playing a part. I was Sky, the astrophysics enthusiast, Sky, the friend. They saw the person I wanted to be, the person I was, beneath the layers of deception. They valued me for my mind and my character, the two things my money had always obscured. The first fruits of my labor began to ripen midway through the semester. My solitary, disciplined existence was paying off. I was not just keeping up in my classes, I was dominating them. My professors, who had no idea I was a Pemberton, started to notice me for my insights and the quality of my work. Professor Davies, the notoriously difficult head of the physics department, stopped me after a lecture one day. "Miss Collins," he said, his expression stern as always, "your paper on gravitational lensing was exceptional. One of the finest undergraduate papers I've read in years. Have you considered applying for the Radcliffe Fellowship? It's a prestigious grant for postgraduate research." His praise was like a balm on my soul. It was pure, unadulterated validation earned through sheer effort. It was worth more to me than any compliment I had ever received about my appearance or my family. My struggles, the long nights and sacrifice social events had given me an edge. While Tiffany and her friends were building social capital, I was building intellectual capital. I had a purpose. That quiet pride began to blossom into real confidence. I walked around campus with my head held a little higher. The loneliness was still there, a dull ache in the background, but it was overshadowed by a growing sense of self-worth. I was proving my grandmother right. I was proving to myself that my value was intrinsic. I didn't need the Pemberton name, I was earning the Collins name, making it mean something all on my own. The turning point arrived with a campus-wide email that sent a ripple of distress through the student body, particularly through its wealthiest echelons. Due to unexpected state budget cuts, several university programs were being downsized. Most tragically for the A-list, the budget for the annual Crystal Ball, the most prestigious social event of the year, was being slashed. The email promised that the ball would still happen, but as a more modest, intimate affair held in the Student Union Gymnasium instead of the opulent Grand Pavilion at the nearby West Haven Hotel. For Tiffany and her friends, this was an existential crisis. The Crystal Ball was their Super Bowl, their Oscars. It was the night to see and be seen, to showcase custom-made gowns and cement their place at the top of the social food chain. A modest affair in a gym was an insult to their very way of life. The gym? Madison shrieked, reading the email over Tiffany's shoulder in the dorm lounge. Are they serious? Are we expected to dance on a basketball court? This is social suicide. Tiffany looked genuinely distraught. This is a tradition. My mother and grandmother went to the Crystal Ball at the Grand Pavilion. It's a legacy. I watched their meltdown from a distance, a strange idea beginning to form in my mind. It was audacious, reckless, and utterly perfect. For weeks, I had been their charity case. Now, I had the opportunity to become their anonymous benefactor. The irony was too delicious to resist. That evening, I made a secure call from a burner phone I'd kept for emergencies. I called my grandmother. I explained the situation and laid out my plan. I wanted to anonymously donate the necessary funds to restore the Crystal Ball to its full glory, and then some. I wanted it to be the most extravagant ball in the university's history. My grandmother was silent for a moment. I could almost hear her smiling through the phone. A Trojan horse of sorts, she mused. You will be giving them the party of their dreams, while they believe you can't even afford a ticket. It's brilliant, Sky. Poetic. She handled the logistics. Through one of our family's more obscure charitable foundations, an anonymous donation of $250,000 was made to West Haven University. The donation came with a few specific stipulations. The money was to be used exclusively for the Crystal Ball, ensuring it would be held at the Grand Pavilion with no expense spared. It also came with a theme, personally suggested by the benefactor, a night of generosity. Finally, the donor was to remain completely anonymous, with their identity known only to the university president, Mr. Thompson. A week later, a new email went out. The Crystal Ball was back on, grander than ever, thanks to the staggering generosity of a secret benefactor. The campus was buzzing. Tiffany and her friends were ecstatic, their social apocalypse averted. Oh my God, can you believe it? Becca squealed. Some amazing, rich person saved us. I love them, whoever they are. They're probably an alum, Carter theorized, puffing out his chest. Someone who understands the importance of tradition, a real class act. They spoke of the secret benefactor with a reverence usually reserved for deities or fashion designers. They praised their taste, their generosity, their understanding of what truly mattered. I would sit with them, listening to them unknowingly sing my praises, and my face would remain a perfect mask of polite agreement. Inside, I was fizzing with a triumphant, secret joy. It was the first major victory in my silent war. Just as the excitement for the ball reached its peak, a small crack appeared in Tiffany's perfect facade. I was studying in the lounge when she came in, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed. She was on the phone, her voice a tense whisper. What do you mean it was declined? Dad, you promised. The ball is in 2 weeks. She hung up and sank into a chair, letting out a choked sob. For the first time since I'd met her, her mask of effortless superiority had slipped, revealing a scared, vulnerable girl underneath. Madison and the others were out. It was just me and her. Against my better judgment, I walked over. Tiffany, are you okay? She looked up at me, her eyes swimming with tears. The sight of me, her resident charity case, seemed to break something in her. The story came tumbling out. Her father's import business had taken a massive, unexpected hit. They weren't broke, not by a long shot, but their liquid assets were frozen and their credit was temporarily shot. The custom-made designer gown she had ordered for the ball, the one she had been talking about for months, couldn't be paid for. She was going to be humiliated. Here was the golden child facing a genuine challenge, a taste of the financial anxiety she thought I lived with every day, and in her moment of crisis, she was turning to me. A role reversal so profound it felt like a scene from a play. A part of me wanted to revel in it, a bigger part, a part that surprised me, felt a pang of genuine empathy. I saw past the queen bee to the girl who had been raised to believe her value was tied to these external trappings. "I'm so sorry, Tiffany," I said, and I meant it. Then, I did something the old Sky never would have. I decided to help her. "Listen," I said, my mind racing. "I've been saving every penny from my library job. It's not much, but books for next semester can wait. How much do you need for the dress?" She stared at me, dumbfounded. You would do that for me?" she whispered. The idea of the poor girl offering to bail her out was so foreign it short-circuited her brain. "We're friends, right?" I said, the words feeling strange on my tongue. In the end, she didn't take my money. My offer, my simple, genuine act of kindness, seemed to shake her to her core. It was the one thing she couldn't process. She ended up calling an aunt who helped her out, but something had shifted between us. She started looking at me differently, with a dawning confusion that bordered on respect. She saw a strength in me that had nothing to do with money, and it was the beginning of her awakening. She started to question the shallow world she had built around herself. Unfortunately, her awakening didn't spread to the rest of her clique. While Tiffany was becoming more reflective, Madison seemed to resent the budding, strange respect between us. She saw my quiet dignity as a challenge to their group's hierarchy. The crystal ball was approaching, and she was planning her own form of entertainment. The invitation arrived under my door, a thick, cream-colored card with embossed silver lettering. It was an official invitation to the crystal ball. Tucked inside was a smaller, handwritten note on Tiffany's personal stationery. "Sky," it read, "I know things have been weird, but I really want you to be there. As my guest. Please come." I knew it was a peace offering. I also knew, with a sinking feeling, that it was the perfect venue for the final act of this drama. Liam and Chloe had already bought their own tickets, eager to see what a one-percenter party looked like from the inside. We planned to go as a small, defiant trio of nerds. My new allies, my chosen family. I accepted Tiffany's invitation. I was walking into the lion's den, but this time, I knew I was the one who had built the cage. The stage was set for the climax, and I had a feeling that the night of generosity was about to take on a whole new meaning. The night of the crystal ball arrived, charged with an electric sense of anticipation. The grand pavilion was a breathtaking sight, transformed into a celestial dreamscape of twinkling fairy lights, shimmering silver drapery, and towering floral arrangements that filled the air with the scent of lilies and orchids. A string quartet played softly in the foyer as students in designer gowns and bespoke tuxedos glided across the marble floors. It was a scene of obscene, beautiful decadence, and I had paid for every last petal and champagne flute. I had chosen my own attire with deliberate care. I wore a simple, vintage navy blue silk gown that I'd found in a high-end thrift store for $75. It was elegant and understated, a stark contrast to the glittering, sequin-encrusted creations favored by the A-list. My only jewelry was a pair of simple pearl earrings my grandmother had given me years ago. I wanted to look like Sky Collins, not Sky Pemberton. Liam and Chloe met me by the entrance. Liam, looking uncomfortably dashing in a rented tux, whistled softly. "Collins, you clean up nice. I barely recognize you without a stack of books in your arms." Chloe beamed, her own simple black dress a perfect complement to mine. "You look amazing, Sky. Let's go see how the other half lives." We walked in together, a small island of authenticity in a sea of performance. Heads turned as we entered. I could feel the questioning glances. Who were these nobodies? Tiffany, looking radiant in her hard-won designer gown, saw us and rushed over, her relief palpable. "Sky, you came," she said, her eyes genuinely bright. "You look beautiful, really." The compliment felt sincere, stripped of its usual condescending undertones. She greeted Liam and Chloe with a polite if slightly strained smile. The transformation in her was real. Madison, however, was another story. She sidled up to us, her eyes sweeping over my simple dress with a look of undisguised disdain. "Oh, Tiffany, there you are," she said, completely ignoring me. "Carter's parents just opened a magnum of vintage champagne. We should go." She shot me a final, dismissive glance before pulling Tiffany away. It was a clear public snub, a reassertion of the established social order. We found a small table near the back, observing the spectacle. For a while, it was almost pleasant. Liam kept us entertained with wry commentary on the guests, and Chloe was fascinated by the physics of the massive crystal chandelier that dominated the center of the ballroom. But I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. I could see Madison conferring with her acolytes, casting furtive, giggling glances in my direction. They were plotting something. The first major act of the evening was a speech from the university president, Mr. Thompson. He was a distinguished, silver-haired man with a warm demeanor. He took the stage to thunderous applause. "Welcome, students, to the annual Crystal Ball," he began. This magnificent evening, this beautiful tradition, was almost lost to us this year. But we are here tonight in this glorious hall because of the truly astounding generosity of one individual, our secret benefactor. The room erupted in applause again. Tiffany, Madison, and their friends clapped with particular vigor, their faces alight with gratitude for the anonymous hero who had saved their social season. I felt a grim smile touch my lips. This benefactor, President Thompson continued, wished to remain anonymous. But they gave this evening its theme, a night of generosity, a reminder that true wealth lies not in what we have, but in what we give. More applause. It was all going according to plan, my plan. An hour later, the band took a break, and Madison slinked onto the stage, a microphone in her hand. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach. This was it. "Hello, West Haven," she chirped into the mic, her voice high and giddy. "We're having a great time tonight, right?" A cheer went up from the crowd. Well, the A-list decided that in the spirit of generosity, we wanted to add our own special award to the evening. We're calling it the Cinderella Award for the person who, against all odds, managed to make it to the ball. Someone who truly embodies the rags-to-riches spirit. My blood ran cold. Liam's hand instinctively found mine under the table. Chloe's eyes were wide with disbelief. The crowd was murmuring, a mixture of confusion and cruel anticipation. "This year's award," Madison announced, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness, "goes to someone who has worked so hard in the library, scrubbing floors and shelving books, just to be here with us tonight. An inspiration to us all. Please join me in congratulating our very own scholarship girl, Sky Collins." A spotlight swung from the stage and landed directly on our table, pinning me in its harsh, white glare. Laughter rippled through the room, mostly from the A-list's corner. Madison's friend Lauren emerged from the side of the stage holding a crown made of twisted tin foil and a mop with a cheap bow tied around it. The final, public humiliation. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. For a split second, the old Sky, the girl desperate for approval, wanted to sink through the floor and disappear. But then I looked at Madison's smug, triumphant face. I saw the flash of horror and shame on Tiffany's. I felt Liam's supportive squeeze on my hand and saw the protective fury in Chloe's eyes. And I remembered my grandmother's words. "You have that same grit. Now, you must decide how you are going to use it." I stood up, calmly, deliberately. I smoothed down my $75 dress and took a deep breath. Instead of looking humiliated, I smiled. A slow, serene smile that seemed to confuse everyone. I wasn't going to let her have this victory. I wasn't going to accept her insult. I was going to turn it back on her, with the full force of the truth. As I took my first step toward the stage, another voice cut through the tense silence. It was President Thompson, striding purposefully toward the microphone Madison was still holding. He looked furious. "That is quite enough, Miss Vance," he said, his voice booming with an authority that silenced the room instantly. He took the microphone from her stunned hand. "The spirit of this event has been profoundly misunderstood tonight, and that gives me cause to break a promise I made." He turned his gaze to the crowd, then let it rest on me as I stood frozen in the middle of the ballroom floor. Our secret benefactor asked for one thing above all else: anonymity. However, they included a single clause, that if I ever felt the theme of the evening, the spirit of generosity, was being mocked or perverted, I had their express permission to reveal their identity. I believe that moment has arrived. A collective gasp went through the room. Everyone looked around, trying to spot the mysterious millionaire in their midst. Carter looked particularly self-important, as if expecting the honor to fall to him. President Thompson's next words landed like a thunderclap. "The person who funded this entire evening, the person who saved this tradition, the person whose generosity you have all been praising, is the very same young woman you have just tried to humiliate. Would you please come to the stage, our benefactor, Miss Sky Collins? Silence. A deep, profound, pin-drop silence. Every eye in the room swiveled from President Thompson to me. Madison's jaw had literally dropped open. Her face, a moment ago so smug, was a mask of utter, horrified disbelief. I walked toward the stage, my steps even and measured. The spotlight followed me, but it no longer felt like an accusation, it felt like a coronation. I reached the stage and President Thompson handed me the microphone, giving me a small, encouraging nod. I looked out at the sea of stunned faces. I saw Liam and Chloe, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning, fierce pride. I saw Tiffany, tears streaming down her face, a look of devastating understanding in her eyes. And I saw Madison and her friends, looking as if the marble floor had just dropped out from under them. "My name is not Sky Collins," I began, my voice clear and steady, amplified throughout the grand hall. "My name is Sky Pemberton." A new wave of shock rippled through the crowd as my true last name registered. The Pemberton name. It was a name everyone in that room knew. "I came to West Haven under a different name because I wanted to find something real," I continued, my gaze locking with Madison's. "I wanted to be seen for who I am, not for what my family has. I wanted to know what it felt like to earn my place, to be valued for my mind and my character. For the most part, it has been the most rewarding experience of my life." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. I met real friends, friends who stood by me when they thought I had nothing, friends who valued my ideas more than my wardrobe. I smiled toward my table. Friends like Liam and Chloe. Liam raised his glass in a silent toast, his grin wide. "But I also learned a very valuable lesson," I said, my voice turning colder as I looked back at the A-list. "I learned that some people are so insecure, so defined by their own privilege, that they can only feel big by making someone else feel small. You toast the generosity of a secret benefactor, but you mock the girl you think is poor. You praise the money, but you insult the person." I took a step forward. "So, let me be clear. I am the scholarship girl. And I am the secret benefactor. I paid for this party. I paid for your champagne. I paid for the roof over your heads tonight. And I learned that you can pay for a party, but you can't buy class. You can't buy kindness. And you certainly can't buy respect." I let that sink in. The humiliation in the room was a palpable, living thing, but it wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to them. "President Thompson," I said, turning to him. "The theme of this evening was a night of generosity. To honor that theme, I'd like to make one final announcement. The anonymous donation to the university was actually much larger than what was used for this ball. I am hereby redirecting the remaining $1.5 million of the endowment. It will no longer be for social events. Effective immediately, it will establish the West Haven Promise Scholarship, a new, fully funded grant for students from low-income backgrounds, covering tuition, housing, and all living expenses. So that no student ever has to feel the way your Cinderella was meant to feel tonight." The room, which had been silent, erupted, but it wasn't just polite applause this time, it was a roar, it was a standing ovation. Students, many of whom were on financial aid themselves, were cheering, some with tears in their eyes. "And," I added, my voice ringing with finality, "I want the student-led selection committee for this new scholarship to be chaired by two of the most hardworking, brilliant, and genuinely good people I have ever met, Liam O'Connell and Chloe Zhang." Liam and Chloe stared at me, their faces a picture of flabbergasted joy. Then, the final, symbolic shift occurred. Tiffany, in her beautiful dress, walked away from Madison's side. She walked past the stage and straight to my table, where she stood beside Chloe's empty chair, her allegiance declared. A few moments later, my grandmother, Evelyn Pemberton, who had been watching from a discreet table at the back, stood up and began walking toward the stage, her expression one of immense pride. She stopped beside me, placing a hand on my arm. The two most important women in my life, my wise elder and my newly awakened friend, had publicly and physically sided with me. Madison, Carter, and the rest of the A-list were left completely, utterly alone, isolated in a sea of their own making. The vindication was absolute. It was quiet, it was powerful, and it was complete. In the aftermath of the crystal ball, the campus was a different world. The story of what happened spread like wildfire, becoming the stuff of West Haven legend overnight. I was no longer Sky Collins, the poor girl, or Sky Pemberton, the heiress. I was just Sky, the girl who had turned the tables on the bullies with spectacular precision. Madison and her inner circle became social pariahs. Their public humiliation was so complete that they were ostracized not just by the general student body, and 434 there's 7.com and N10 and 43, but by their own wealthy peers who were horrified by their lack of class and desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. Madison, I heard later, transferred to a different school at the end of the semester. My new life, the one I had started to build in the shadows, was now gloriously out in the open. I was surrounded by my chosen family. Liam and Chloe, initially overwhelmed by their new responsibilities, rose to the occasion with grace and fierce dedication. Our meetings for the West Haven Promise Scholarship Committee became the new center of my social life. We weren't just friends, we were partners in a mission. We were making a tangible difference, creating opportunities for students who deserved a chance. For the first time, the Pemberton money felt like a tool for good, not a barrier to connection. My success was no longer just academic, it was deeply personal and profoundly fulfilling. I was free from the need for anyone's approval because I was finally, truly approving of myself. Tiffany's journey was more complicated. A few days after the ball, she came to my dorm room. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, and she looked younger, more fragile. She offered a raw, heartfelt apology, with no excuses. She confessed how her upbringing had warped her sense of self-worth, making her cruel and shallow. She was ashamed, and she was determined to change. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Sky," she said, tears in her eyes. "But I hope one day you can believe that I am truly sorry. You were a better friend to me in your lie than I ever was to you in my truth." It was the beginning of a long, slow process. Her remorse was genuine, but the trust had been shattered. I didn't welcome her back with open arms, but I didn't shut her out completely either. I recognized the courage it took for her to confront her own ugliness. Her path to redemption would be her own to walk, but I was willing to let her walk it near me. I established firm boundaries, not just with her, but with my own life. I decided to stay at West Haven, but as myself, Sky Pemberton. I didn't move into a luxury apartment or start driving a fancy car. I kept my dorm room, I kept my library job, much to the astonishment of my parents. I liked the work, it kept me grounded. The power dynamic had permanently shifted. I was no longer defined by my wealth or by other people's perception of it. I was defined by my actions, my choices, and my character. Forgiveness for Tiffany, and even for Madison, would be conditional. Something earned over time, not freely given away. I had learned the value of my own grace, and I would not dispense it cheaply. The greatest lesson I learned through this whole ordeal was that self-worth is an inside job. For so long, I had been seeking validation from the outside, from my family, from friends, from a world that saw my name before it saw me. But true strength, I discovered, is forged in adversity. The loneliness, the struggle, the pain of being underestimated, they weren't obstacles. They were the very things that built my resilience, my determination, and my compassion. The family you choose, the people who see you and value you for your true self, can be more powerful and more important than the one you are born into. My chosen family, my grandmother, Liam, Chloe, and eventually, a reformed and humbled Tiffany became my true north. So that's my story. It started with a lie to find the truth, and it ended with a truth that changed everything. I set out to escape my gilded cage, and in the end, I learned that the cage was never really about the money, it was about fear, and now, I'm not afraid anymore. I have one final question for all of you. Have you ever had a moment in your life where you had to define your own worth, even when the world was telling you that you were worthless? Share your story in the comments below, I'd love to read them. And if my story resonated with you, please don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, no one can determine your value but you. So go out there, be your own benefactor, and build a life that is priceless.